There's growing pressure on Israel regarding the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Well, during the UNSC meet, US has made it extremely clear and said that Washington will be watching Israel so that Tel Aviv is not pursuing a policy of starvation in northern Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel has denied blocking aid and has said that at least 50 trucks arrived in northern Gaza, which is enough. That's exactly what Israel has at this point of time. While there are also reports circulating that Israel might attack Iran for the October 1st barrage of missiles before the US presidential polls. To talk more on all of this and exactly what is happening in West Asia, we're now being joined by Dr. Malcolm Davis, Senior Analyst in Defense Strategy and Capability at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. He's joining us live from Canberra in Australia. Thank you for joining us on WION.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, the US Envoy has clearly said to the UN at the UNSC meet that Washington will be closely watching Israel's so that Israel is not pursuing a policy of starvation, saying that Israel has a responsibility to do all that it can to avoid civilian casualties. This comes day after US warned of cutting military supplies if aid is not boosted. How do you sense the shift in US's tone regarding Israel's starvation policy in Gaza and perhaps the whole operation that Israel has been doing in Gaza?
Well, firstly, let me apologize. It looks like we've got a bad connection here because there's some sort of background music going on. I'm not sure if your audience can hear that. But let me answer the question as best as I can in terms of your reference to Israel's starvation policy. I'm not sure if that actually will happen. Israel is very cognizant of ensuring continued support from the United States in particular, particularly as it goes into an election cycle. And so therefore they're going to be very aware of not doing anything that will undermine that support. And certainly if they were to be seen to be deliberately starving Palestinians in northern Gaza, that would certainly undermine that support. It would cut off US military support for the defense of Israel, including in the threat against the threat of Iran. So I'm very skeptical that this sort of so-called starvation policy is actually going to happen.
Dr. Davis, it does look like that US is walking a tightrope between what it wants Israel to do, that is boost humanitarian aid in Gaza, and of course the arms that US continues to provide. How do you envisage US balancing both of these things?
Well, the US is in a particularly difficult situation. The Biden administration obviously is very cognizant of the fact that there is an election, so they cannot be seen to be walking away from Israel completely because that would have a very negative effect on support for Kamala Harris. But at the same time, continuing to support Israel, including with military assistance, is undermining support from the progressive left wing of the Democrat Party. And so, therefore, there's a difficult choice there for the Biden administration, which is ultimately it's President Biden here that's making the decision about how to support Israel in this crisis. I think that what you will see is the United States in these last few weeks of the US presidential election campaign maintaining a very steady as you go, low-profile, continued support for Israel. They'll defend Israel against Iranian attacks that are quite likely in the event that Israel does retaliate in the coming weeks against that earlier Iranian attack. But they'll continue also to put pressure on Tel Aviv not to undertake any actions either against the Gazans, the Palestinians in Gaza, in an action against Hamas, or against Lebanese civilians in the actions against Hezbollah that could undermine Israel's international support.
Let's also talk about the on-ground operation that's happening in Gaza at this point of time. The Israeli military siege of northern Gaza, which was aimed at stopping Hamas from regrouping. Reports now suggest that the IDF, they are now looking at a general's plan to defeat Hamas and northern Gaza. If you can just give us a rundown of what that plan is and what's the ultimate aim of the IDF forces in northern Gaza.
Well, once again, I'm skeptical about the so-called general's plan. I don't think Netanyahu will be foolish enough to support it. The general's plan is really about forced eviction of Palestinians from northern Gaza. It's ethnic cleansing, effectively. And Netanyahu would have to know that if he does that, if he authorizes the IDF to undertake such an ethnic cleansing, then he would lose all support from the United States. So I think that what you will see is that so-called general's plan is quietly put in a shelf somewhere and forgotten about. And you will see the Israeli Defense Force continue its operations in Gaza. I mean, really, when you look at it, the IDF have effectively defeated Hamas already. There's very little in the way of Hamas fighting forces left. There's some leadership, but I think that they're scattered. So I don't think there's any real need for this so-called general's plan. I think what the Israelis have to do is try and win back the hearts and minds of the Palestinian people, and that means that they need to stop the fighting and start helping the Palestinian people, but at the same time preventing Hamas from coming back into the picture.
Given US's ironclad support for Israel, especially with the THAAD missiles in Israel, along with US troops in active combat, and Israel's defiant ways we've seen so far, what weight do these American warnings actually have right now?
Well, I think they have great weight in the sense that Israel knows that support from the United States is very important for its position, particularly when you look at the broader regional context of an emerging threat from Iran. It's clear that Iran probably will attack Israel again. Certainly once Israel launches attacks on Iran in retaliation for its earlier Iranian missile strike. There's every suggestion that that Israeli attack will happen before the US election day. So you could see a very tense situation going into early November where Israel attacks Iran, Iran retaliates, and Israel would require US support in that scenario, particularly to defend Israel against Iranian missiles. That's one of the reasons why the United States has deployed THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense System, into Israel, including with US boots on the ground.
Right, Dr. Davis, thank you so much for joining us on WION with your insights on this.
My pleasure.